in this video I am going to show you how to approach problems given in TCS CPA, that is the Tata Consultancy Services Camera Proctored Assessments. So this is a question of Python programming. So let's begin with this question. So the question is as follows. First we have to create a class sponsor. So the name of the class should be sponsor and these are the attributes. So let's start. So here we have to keep in mind that all the names followed in the question should be the same. Like I have to name this class as sponsor and not sponsors or something else. So we have defined this class. Now we have to define a constructor which will initialize all these values. So def so here we will have one variable as self, and apart from this all these other variables. Okay, now we need to initialize each of them. So we initialize these values as follows. Self.sponsor name equals sponsor name. This convention would be followed for all others. Okay, so this is over. We have done this part, created a class and defined the constructor. Now we have to define two functions which are not a part of any class. So we will get out of this class and define the first function as getSponsor. Okay, so getSponsor, this method takes a list of sponsor objects, that is sponsor list, and a string for sponsor category, that is sponsor category, as arguments. So we need two arguments over here. So now we will come to this function later on. So I am using this pass. Similarly, we have to define another function, namely find sponsor with maximum subsidiaries. So this method would take a list of sponsor objects as argument and find the sponsor who is having highest number of subsidiaries. So we have only one argument. I will use pass over here. So we will come back to these functions later on. First we will write the main program and then check if everything is working or not. When everything would be fine, then we will come back and complete these functions. So now writing the main function. So to start the main function, we started it as follows. If dunder name equals dunder main, here dunder is double underscores and then name, then again double underscores. So now let's start. So first we have to read the values for sponsor, create sponsor objects and add them to the list. So first we'll read how many sponsors has to be entered, that value. So number of sponsors, we need an integer input for it, so we are using int input, and we don't need to print anything to the console because the input would be automatically handled by the compiler in the TCS exam. So now for each and every sponsor we have to enter its values like the sponsor name, sponsor company, subsidiaries and sponsor category. So for I in range number of sponsors, first we'll take the name, as input, then we'll take the input as company, okay, then number of subsidiaries, because given in the question we have to now read the number of representing the count of subsidiaries, that is a sponsor will have multiple subsidiaries. So for example, Intel is a sponsor, then it may have 4 subsidiaries. So here we'll take the number, that is how many subsidiaries that does that sponsor have, so that we can take input accordingly. So this number would be an integer value again. Then we have to read a string representing the name of subsidiary and add them to a list. So first we'll create a subsidiary list. And we'll run a loop for number of subsidiaries, and we'll append the values to the subsidiary list. Subsidiary list dot append. Here we'll take the input. So whatever input will be given from the console would be appended to this subsidiary list. Okay, so now yes, this sponsor category is left. Let's take that too. Okay, so now we create a object of class sponsor, and also we need a list of sponsors for this. So for that, first we'll create a sponsor list over here. This sponsor list will store all the names of the sponsor objects. So now we'll create a sponsor object over here. So for creating a sponsor object, we'll create it as follows. Write the name of class, then in curly braces we have to give all these 4 values, that is the name, then company. Okay, so we have this name, company. We don't need this number of subsidiaries, we need this list. So we'll give here subsidiary list. and sponsor category. Okay, so this will create a list. Sorry, so this will create a sponsor object. Now we need to append the sponsor object to this sponsor list. So sponsor list dot append, and we will keep this in curly braces. Okay, so this is done. Now we need to read the category of sponsor that is to be passed as second argument to the function getSponsor. Now we need this. So we'll come out of this loop and sponsor category. See here, you can see I'm using sponsor category, the same variable twice. Since this is inside the loop and I do not need this later, so I can use the same name in Python. It will create no issues. Okay, so now we need to call these two functions, getSponsor and findSponsor with maximum subsidiaries. So first we'll call this getSponsor and we'll store its value that is returned by getSponsor in a variable. So this is the name, sponsor names. We are calling the function getSponsor and we'll pass sponsor list and sponsor category. Similarly, we will call the find sponsor with maximum subsidiaries and store it in sponsor with max subsidiary. And we will pass an object that is the sponsor list to this function. Okay. Okay. So now, before continuing further, we will first check if our code is running perfectly or not, or if we have any issues. So I am giving a print done. So if our code will run perfect, then we'll get an output as done. After this, you can just compile your code in the TCS compiler, but since I am doing this on PyCharm, I'll have to compile this myself. So run. Here I need to give the input. So I have the sample input, I'm giving it over here. Let me copy this first. Okay. So yes, this was my input and I got this done as the output. This done signifies that my code is running perfectly fine until here. Now I'll proceed further. If I had any issues with my code, then I would have got some error, but since I didn't get any error, this code is fine. So now let's first complete this getSponsor. So basically over here I am telling you the approach which I followed while clearing my TCS CPA. This helped me a lot because as we all know, TCS compiler was not up to the mark. So earlier I used to have a lot of issues with TCS compiler in TCS CPA. So let's get back to the question. This method takes a list of sponsor objects and a string for sponsor category as arguments. Method finds the name of sponsor from the sponsor list having sponsor category same as the value passed to second argument. Okay. So we need to check if there is a sponsor which has the same sponsor category. So first we have to run a loop for I in sponsor list. This will iterate over all the sponsors. Now we'll pick up the sponsor category from each value. So if sponsor category dot lower, here this is the sponsor category. If this is equal to I dot sponsor category dot lower, so here I am using this dot lower to convert both of them to lowercase, because this comparison should be case insensitive. You can also use dot upper. So if this is true, then I think we need to store it somewhere. So first we'll create a list over here. Let's name it return list. This would be returned by this function. So we will append this value to return list. The name of the sponsor whose sponsor category is matching. Okay, so this is done. Now this function also says that if no sponsor of the given sponsor category is found, then method returns none. That is, if this list is empty, then this method should return none. So now come out of if, then out of for, and now let's check if this list has any objects or not. So if len of return list is equal to 0, that is, if this list has no objects, then this function should return none. Else we have to return a sorted list over here. So first we'll sort this list using the function return list dot sort. So this dot sort method would sort this return list in ascending order, and then we will return this thing. Okay, so this function seems fine. Let's check it out. Now here first I'll print the sponsor names, because this get sponsor function will store everything in the sponsor names. So let's print this and check. Again I'll run this code. Okay, so I am having an error. Okay, so I have missed an R over here. Let's check now. Okay, so I am getting two values over here. Let's see if it matches or not. Okay, so I need output as Activision, Atos and Intel. So Activision and Atos I am getting from this function get sponsor, and this Intel value will come from our other function, that is find sponsor with maximum subsidiaries. So far so good. We are good to go. Let's complete this second function now. Find sponsor with maximum subsidiaries. So here we have to take the sponsor list and find the sponsor who is having highest number of subsidiaries. Okay. So first we will initialize the max subsidiaries. Sorry. as -1. Here note, Python don't use max or min. For example, don't type like this because Python has an internal variable named max and an internal variable named min, which is overlooked by TCS compiler and then it throws an error. So I am using max subsidiaries instead of just max. So then we need to also store the name of that sponsor. So max subsidiary sponsor, or max subsidiaries RIES sponsor. This is blank for now. Now let's iterate in this sponsor list. Now we will check the length. If length of the subsidiary list, because the sponsor list would have a list of subsidiaries, so we'll check the length of this self.subsidiaries. So here we are using if I dot subsidiaries length, if this is greater than max subsidiaries. So in this case we need to change the value of max subsidiaries and replace it with len of I dot subsidiaries. Also we need to update this max subsidiary sponsor name. So this would be equal to I dot sponsor name. So this loop and this if statement will find the sponsor who is having maximum subsidiaries. And finally our function would return this value to main. Okay, let's check if this is working or not. So we have sponsor with max subsidiaries. Let's check if we are getting Intel over here or not. Run this again. Can I paste it? Yes. So we are getting Intel. So now our code is almost done. Finally, what we need to do is we need to print all of this together in different lines. Now I will remove this print statement. Now first I'll iterate over this list. For I in sponsor list, sponsor names. Sponsor names, print I. So this will print all the objects in sponsor name. After this I'll finally print sponsor with max subsidiaries. Now let's see if this runs or not. Again I'm pasting this input and yes, I'm getting Activision, Atos and then Intel. So now finally this code is running. So this was all for today. Thank you.